Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 68. I am your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan the Man. If you can't do it, nobody can. A few people have tried, but unsuccessfully. And this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden boats all over the world. Thanks for tuning in today. I am recording this on New Year's Eve, 2012, so it's December 31st, 2012. It's about 6 o'clock at night, so in about 6 hours it'll be 2013. So depending upon where you live in the world, well, actually you will be listening to this in 2013 because that's when I will release it, on January 3rd. So I hope you're having a great day. Today's featured segment is an interview with myself. Well, it's not exactly an interview with myself, but it's me talking. I'm actually going to be reflecting on 2012, some of the cool stuff that happened with Hooked on Wooden Boats and some of the great experiences I had. And then I'm going to talk about 2013, some of the plans that I have and goals. Just kind of have a fun time with it today. So if you're not into reviews or reminiscing or looking forward, then tune in again next week. Hello. Is anybody there? Anybody out there still? Oh, okay. Just kidding. We're going to talk about 2012. I'm going to talk about it. And then talk about what's happened in 2013. And actually, I'm going to back up to September of 2012, which is when I decided to take a podcasting class and start a podcast about wooden boats. And actually, I talked about this in my first episode of Hooked on Wooden Boats, which was September 22nd, 2011. So when I first started the podcast, I wasn't really sure where my content was going to come from. I knew that I loved wooden boats. I loved building them. I had built a few boats myself. I could talk about them to a certain extent, but I didn't know how long that would last. And I really thought, okay, I'm just going to get this thing rolling and see what happens with it. So my first podcast, I talked about why I was starting the Hooked on Wooden Boats podcast, the very first in the world about wooden boats in a podcast. And then the second episode, I talked about my spirit canoe, is what I called it. So you'll have to listen to that. It's kind of an interesting story. And then in week 3, my wife and I were at a beach house in Grays Harbor, Washington. And I was thinking, man, I'd like to interview somebody that has something to do with wooden boats. So I got on the internet and I found this facility called the Grays Harbor Historical Seaport, which I'd never heard of. Apparently they were into wooden boats and doing some stuff, so I thought, well, I'll shoot this guy an email. I think his name's Les Bolton, and see if he has any interest. So I shot him an email, said, hey Les, this is Dan Matson. I'm starting a wooden boat podcast. I'd love to come interview you. I'm in town for a couple days, and here's my phone number, and sent the email off. And thought, well, that's probably the end of that. Well, as it turns out, about probably only 15 minutes later, I get a call from Les. And he says, hey, I'm Les. Why don't you come over here and let's do an interview? That sounds really cool. So I'm like, okay, let's do it. I'm kind of like, I was just shocked that he called me. You know, most people don't use the phone anymore. First of all, you get a text message or an email. So anyway, the next day, my wife and I went over there and interviewed Les, had a great interview. It was about probably 45 minutes in length, and had a great time. And so I did a couple more interviews after that with Dick Wagner at the Center for Wooden Boats and a few more things. And then I just thought, man, what am I going to do now? I'm kind of like running out of material here, it feels like. But then about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 episodes into this adventure, I get an email from a guy named Marty Loken. And Marty is a big wooden boat guy. He has the Island Boat Shop in Nordland, Washington, which is near Port Townsend. And Marty sent me this very kind email and says, "Hey, we really appreciate what you're doing. It's really awesome. Thanks for promoting wooden boats because we think it's really cool." And I was like kind of blown away. It's like, wow, somebody found me and they really see some value in what I'm doing. So I emailed Marty back and said, "Marty, could I come over and interview you?" And he said, "Sure, come on over." So we set up a time and I went and interviewed Marty, which was really great. And I started getting connected with some of the folks in Port Townsend. And it's interesting now that I've been doing this for a little bit over a year. I have met so many people and found out about so many boat shops, so many hobbyists, enthusiasts, captains, boat builders, designers, people that want to get into wooden boats. It's like they're just coming out of the woodwork. And I'm just kind of seeing this now, that my list of people I would like to interview is actually growing and not shrinking. I was pretty concerned about there for a while. It's like, okay, what am I going to talk about now? Who am I going to interview? And it's really worked out great. I mean, I've got a list of written down probably 20 or 30 names that I'd like to interview. That's not counting the ones that are floating around in my head and some names I've got in some emails for some folks. So that's pretty cool. So this last year has really been a fun adventure for me to just meet all these people and everything. But I thought I'd share with you some of the highlights of 2012. And if you're on my e-news subscription list, I sent out a top 10 happenings of 2012. And I'm going to kind of review these on the podcast here and talk about some of those. So number one, and these aren't necessarily in any kind of order. So in 2012, 52 Hooked on Wooden Boat podcasts were published. And now this podcast will be the 68th podcast since I started in September 2012. So that's pretty cool. And I've been real consistent doing it every week, which I know people appreciate that. When I'm listening to podcasts, I love to know that every Friday by noon, for example, that the 48days.com podcast is going to be publishing a new episode that I can listen to. There was 1 week about 3 months ago where I got really stressed out because I published the episode, but there was some technical problem and it didn't publish. And it was about 3 or 4 days late, but it finally got published and I got through that, so that was good. Number two, I'm not a big guy on statistics, but it is kind of fun to watch the show grow. Since I started the podcast in 2011, the episodes that have been published so far have been downloaded more than 35,000 times by people in 82 different countries. So that's pretty cool. And it's hard to read too much into those numbers because, for instance, you can go to my website and listen to the podcast directly from the web without downloading it. So that number doesn't show up here. Or you can stream it from your phone or your MP3 player, and that kind of changes the equation. But it's just kind of fun to know that lots of people are listening, and the show has been downloaded a lot of times. So in 2012, I did more than 50 interviews, probably did 55 or 60, maybe 65 interviews total. All kinds of different people that I interviewed, which is kind of fun for me. This isn't just about wooden boat rock stars, so to speak, although I did interview some of them, which is really cool. But it's about the common guy that's got the itch to build something in his backyard. It's about somebody that's an instructor at a wooden boat school, or a captain of a schooner, or a designer from New Zealand that loves to design small boats for people and solve problems, or a dude that's building a Viking ship that's going to be used for sail training and rowing, not just sailing, but rowing. Blue water gurus, people that have sailed all over the world in boats for years at a time. people that have written books about wooden boats and about their adventures. Adventurers, which I've met a lot, people that have, one gentleman, Howard Rice, that sailed a canoe, 16-foot Klepper canoe, around Cape Horn and back. Only person that's ever done that. And lots of craftsmen, people that are really talented with their hands in building boats and building sails and building hardware for boats and rigging boats and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So the spectrum of people that I interviewed throughout the year was really cool. Just a lot of variation, some names that people recognize and other names that people don't, which is very cool. I received some really cool emails from all over the world: Poland, Australia, Brazil, Africa, Aruba, Sweden, Great Britain, to name a few. I thought I'd just read a couple clips just for fun from different people. I'm not going to read their names, but just what they said. Thanks for the great podcast. I found your podcast last week and have been eagerly listening to them every chance I get, including on my bicycle commute. That's pretty sweet. Thanks, Dan, for the fine podcast. They are by far the best in the boating world and my favorite. After hearing Lynn and Larry Party, I read the first book, now awaiting the second from the library. Here's another one. First of all, thank you for what you're doing in this great podcast. I'm Scott Walker, one of the 2012 grads of the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building, and I've been loving your program. And it turns out that Scott works on a research vessel in Hawaii. It's a big steel boat, and he's down in the engine room listening to my podcast. Here's another one. I love the podcast. It is hands down my favorite to listen to. Your style is very casual, and the interviewees very fascinating. Very good on that one. Just a quick note to let you know that I am hooked on your addictive podcasts. It is a sheer pleasure to listen to it while commuting to and from work in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and I always find myself anxious for the next episode. So that's just a sample of some of the emails I've gotten. I've gotten some other emails from folks that have been encouraged to build a boat for the very first time, some of them with their children, which is really cool. I mean, that's really exciting for me to think that because of the podcast, these people are going to get out and do something productive with their hands, learn some new skills, have some fun with it, get their kids involved. That's very rewarding for me. Number 5, the first ever Hooked on Wooden Boats Meet-up happened at the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival in September. So I told this story earlier, but it's worth repeating, I was asked to be a presenter at the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival, so I sent out a newsletter or an email to my e-news list, and I said, hey, I'm going to be at the Wooden Boat Festival in Port Townsend in September. If you can make it there, here's my phone number. Give me a call. Let's hook up and get together. So I immediately got an email back from Korey Rubin and Christina Cogan from Florida. And they said, hey, we're going to make reservations. We're going to come out tomorrow. We're going to check out the school, and we'd love to meet you. And then also I got an email from Ralph Duncan, who lives south of Port Townsend, about an hour or two. So I got to the festival and connected with Korey and Christina and Ralph. It was really fun to do that and get to know them a little bit better and find out what they're up to. And just, through this podcast, meet some people from other parts of the country. It was really sweet. And if Korey and Christina and Ralph are listening, thank you so much for being there and looking me up. And great to meet you guys. And I wish you the best. And for Korey and Christina, I hope to see you guys out here in 2013, which starts tomorrow, at the boat school. That would be so sweet. So very cool. So that was the first ever Hooked on Wooden Boats meetup. Number 6, one of the fun interviews that I did that was just kind of random. It was while I was at the Maritime Heritage Festival in St. Helens, Oregon. It's a small little festival there. It's in there, I don't know, they've been going like 3 to 5 years, somewhere in that range. There was a beautiful ski boat there, a wooden ski boat from the 60s. And I got to talking to the gentleman whose boat it was. His name was Cy Miller. And Cy's probably in his 70s, I'm guessing, early 70s, something like that. And got to talking to him. Well, he bought this boat brand new, 1967 Century ski boat. It was an absolutely gorgeous boat. I got to talking to him about the finish on it. And he said, I put 50 coats of varnish on the boat. And I'm like, seriously? That's like almost thicker than the wood. This thing was just glistening in the sun. He said, yeah. He said, what I did is I put on a coat every day for 50 days. I'd come home, put a coat of varnish on, sand it the next night, put on another coat. He did that for 50 days. Pretty amazing stuff. Speaking of 50, I ran into a wooden boat shop that's about 10 miles from where I work in Burlington, Washington. It's the Smith's Boat Shop, a guy named Fred Smith, who was celebrating his 50th year of building wooden boats on Samish Island in Washington State. And I was going to say here, if you wanted to listen to that interview, it's episode number 41. Anyway, Fred started building these boats 50 years ago with his brother. He's still building a few boats a year today. He's using... he has built over the years Pelicans, El Toros, and Prams, and he has the same mold that he purchased 50 years ago. He actually bought the plans for it from the USA Plywood Association for 50 cents, used those plans to build this mold, and he still has it in his shop. So that's a pretty cool story there. Number 7, I had the privilege of meeting and interviewing sailing legends and authors Lynn and Larry Pardey in September at the Wooden Boat Festival in Port Townsend. That was really cool. I'd never met them before, although I had seen them at the festival before, and my son Josh had read some of their books. And I just thought, wow, that would really be cool if I could hook up with them while they were going to be at the festival. And so I emailed Jake over at the Northwest Maritime Center, said, Jake, can you hook me up with the Pardeys? Anyway, they got us connected, and Lynn and Larry were very gracious, sat down with me for about an hour, did a really fun interview, and that's actually episode number 52, that was kind of a highlight of the year. Number 7. So number 8, I got to build my own boat during the year, which is my 12-foot lap straight canoe. It's about 90% done now, and I really thought I would finish it in 2012. But all I've got to do is put one more coat of paint on the hull. I've painted the hull white, and varnish the inside of the boat, and it'll be done. So I figure about another 300 hours. No, I'm just kidding. It won't take me that long. It will take some time, though. We've got cold weather now, so the varnishing, that's going to be an issue, because varnishing in cold weather, I don't know. If anybody out there has some experience with that, let me know, because at this point I'm not really sure how that's going to work. But anyway, it's a really pretty boat. I'm going to put a picture of it in its current state up on the website so you can take a look at that. But the fun thing for me was I got to talk about it pretty much every week on the podcast, just give you a little update, which kind of held me accountable, and also it gave me a little different view of boat building as far as looking at ways to do it better, tips that I could pass on to other people that I've learned or want to learn, and that sort of stuff. So that was pretty cool. So through my travels and interviews this year, which have actually been in Washington and Oregon State, I've made dozens of new friends, learned a ton about wood boats, and have gotten to sit down and meet some of the coolest people and hear fascinating life stories. As you know by now, when I do this, I really like to hear people's stories. It's like, where are you from? What did you do as a kid? Why do you like wooden boats? What are you up to now? Why are you passionate about this? And I really like to ask questions about that, because I find that so fascinating, how people got to where they are in their journey. So that's been really cool, and I've gotten to know a lot of people in Port Townsend, especially at the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building. My friend Pete Leanhoutz there has been really awesome to help me connect with people. I've interviewed quite a few of the instructors there, the business manager, Katie Whalen, And Pete has sent me a couple of very kind letters this year telling me how much he appreciates what I'm doing, how it's helping the school get the word out about what they're up to. And so that's really been fun, because now when I go to Port Townsend and I go to the Maritime Center, or I go to Point Hudson or Boat Haven or to the boat school, it's like I know people and they know me by name, and that's really kind of fun. Number 10 on the list was I was asked to and did a presentation at the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival in Port Townsend in September, which for me was a first to be invited. It was just an invitation I received by email saying, "Hey, Dan, we'd love to come and see you present at the festival." And so I went and did that, which was really cool. I learned some things that I can make the presentation better next year. But I also got to spend 3 full days at the boat festival, which I had never done before. Although I've been going to that boat festival since the 90s sometime, probably 15 years or more. Usually I would just go for the day, but I got to spend 3 full days there and interview some really fun people and give a presentation, and so that was really cool. And I got to go to some other festivals and shows that I had never been to before. I got to go to the Olympia Wooden Boat Fair in Olympia, Washington. I got to reconnect at the Center for Wooden Boats Festival in Lake Union in Seattle. I hadn't been to that show for probably 5 years or more, so I got to go to that this year. I got to go to the Pocket Yacht Palooza in Port Townsend in May. I got to drop in on the Scamp Camp at the Northwest Maritime Center in Port Townsend. That was in August, where they did a 2-week camp to build the Scamp sailboat. And I got to go to the Maritime Heritage Festival in St. Helens, Oregon, which is really cool. My friend Chris Finks is there, and he's started the Maritime Heritage Coalition in the Portland, Oregon area. So it's pretty cool. I got to do some traveling around anywhere from, I was down in Olympia, I was down in Portland, Oregon, I was in Port Townsend quite a bit, I was up in Bellingham, I was in Anacortes, Samish Island, just to name a few. So that was pretty cool. So I thought it was kind of interesting to look at my statistics, which I said before I never looked at, which that isn't true. I never look at them, but occasionally I look at them. I was just curious which of the episodes have been downloaded the most. So episode number 20, which is an interview with Sam Devlin, who's a boat designer in Olympia, Washington, is the most downloaded podcast so far. The second most downloaded podcast is the very first one I did, called Why Start the World's First Wooden Boat Podcast. Number 3 on the list is the interview with Les Bolton at the Grays Harbor Historical Seaport, which is where the Lady Washington wooden boat is, wooden ship, which is pretty cool. Number 4 on the list was Larry Cheek, episode 13. Larry's a wooden boat hobbyist and an author. He's written a couple books about boat building, which are very interesting. Number 5 on the list is the Parties, Lynn and Larry Party, episode 52. Number 6 is Dick Wagner, who founded the Center for Wooden Boats back in the 70s, I believe it was. That's episode number 4. And episode number 5 is an interview with Korey Rubin, who has the Skin Boat School in Anacortes, Washington. So those are the most popular podcasts as far as downloads go. So overall, I'm very pleased with 2012. I had a lot of fun. I met a ton of people. It was really phenomenal, probably beyond my greatest expectations. As far as the connections I made, the things that I learned, the fun that I had. I mean, this stuff is fun. I mean, I just do this as a hobby. I'm not really making any money at it, but I love doing it. I mean, it's if I have an opportunity to go somewhere for the day and do 3 or 4 interviews and sit down and talk to people and take photographs, that's like a really good day for me. So thank you for being part of that. If you're listening to this, let's talk about 2013. So I'm writing out some goals for 2013. And I really would like to take the podcast to the next level. So for me, that means making some improvements to the website, which I've got some ideas on some things I want to do to make it a little more user-friendly and intuitive to use. I'd like to improve the equipment that I have, the recording equipment, to improve the sound quality. Another thing I want to do is have a better email response time. Right now, I'm not always responding within a day or two to the emails that I get, and I want to make that a higher priority in 2013. Also, I've talked about writing an ebook, the very first ebook, which I really want to do that in 2013. And it's probably going to be a book about, it's either going to be about my top wooden boat tips, a book of 10 to 20 tips on wooden boats, or about building your first wooden boat. It'll be one of those. It'll be offered free to those that subscribe to the e-newsletter, or to those that are already subscribers to the e-newsletter. They'll get it for free also. And then I've mentioned a couple weeks ago that I have a brand new camera. It's a really nice Canon digital camera, DSLR. In 2014, I really want to step up the photography and get some really great wooden boat photos with the camera, so that, say, in October, November of 2013, I'm going to offer a wooden boat calendar for sale with some of the boats that I've taken pictures of with some of the people in them. So that'll be pretty cool. Personally, I want to build a scamp in 2013, and I plan on going to the scamp camp to do that. And if you don't know what the scamp is, it's an 11-foot 11-inch micro cruiser, 5-foot 5-inch beam, has a water ballast compartment for 175 pounds of water. It's a balanced lug rig. It's a pram bow. It's lap straight. Has a lot of flotation. It's got an off-center centerboard. Very seaworthy boat. And if you want to find out more about that, you can listen to Hooked on Wooden Boats episode 48, where I interview the designer of the boat, John Welsford, who is from New Zealand. Now, I got to be honest, also in 2013, I like to start producing some income from Hooked on Wooden Boats. And the way I would like that to happen is that I would develop some products, some books, a calendar, some other things that would be appealing to people that are into wooden boats. Because over the next 5 years, I really want to develop this into an income that would be adequate to support my wife and I, and do that for retirement. I think that'd be awesome. So that's a goal too I want to share. And if you have ideas for 2013, things that improvements you'd like to see with the website or the way that I do the podcast, I'm open to constructive criticism and open to ideas for improving things, open to ideas on who I interview and that sort of thing. So please give me some feedback. You can send that to dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com, or you can record directly from your computer if you have a microphone. If you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/voicemail, that'll take you to a recording button that you can click and leave a message for me. So that would be awesome. I'd love to hear from you. And also, if you'd just like to reflect on 2012 with me, maybe let me know which of these shows you enjoyed the most and ideas that you have for 2013. I would love to find out about that. And I do want to mention that I already did make an improvement to the website. It's one that I've been thinking about for probably 10 months, but I wasn't sure how to do it. But I actually added to the menu of the website a button called Index. And if you go to that index, there's a list there of all the podcasts that I have published by number. So there's 3 columns. In the left-hand column is the podcast number. In the middle column is who the interview or what the podcast is about. And in the third column is more information about that particular episode. So the fun thing about this is you can scan down through that list and you can see names of people and things that I've podcasted about. And if those are of interest to you, you can simply click on the episode number, which is a hyperlink, and it'll take you to that episode. And this will save you from having to scroll through all the episodes and click on, if you've done this on my website, the way it was working is you'd go down 5 or 10 episodes and you'd click previous entry or next entry and it would load 5 or 10 more and you'd have to go through that big list. Well, this is simply a table that you can scroll through very quickly and see what each episode is about. It's just going to help you navigate and find your way around the website a whole lot more. So I'm pretty excited about that, and I'd love to get your feedback about that too. So thanks for being part of the journey in 2012. It's been a lot of fun. I hope it's been as rewarding for you as it has been for me. If you enjoy the show, please pass the word on. Tell your friends about it. Go to iTunes and leave a 5-star review, or go to my website and click on one of the share links for Facebook or Twitter or Pinterest and share with other people what I'm up to. And get the word out. I would love it if you would do that. And there's several ways to connect with me, Dan at hookedonwoodenboats.com. You can leave a voice message for me, as I mentioned earlier, hookedonwoodenboats.com/voicemail. You can leave comments on my website under each podcast that I write show notes for. You can, what else can you do? You can subscribe to my e-newsletter, which is monthly. Go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe to do that. I send out a monthly newsletter just to stay connected with people and let you know what's going on in my world. Or you can send pictures and stories to my email. You can call my voicemail feedback hotline, 424-261-2360. Thanks for being part of the journey again. Have a great year in 2013, and I'll look forward to talking to you soon. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan, over and out. Have a great week.